This represents you after getting your heart rate up from hammering my little hole until I squeal.
I need to wake up.
Please ignore the watermark. I do not
What
know
is this
how
I'm
to
hearing?
remove that. Next. Another great reason to fuck me is...
That's fire! But you know what's also fire? My video, since 4 heavy cruisers are potentially coming to War Thunder this year already, judging by this decal teasing them, starting to complete World War II era ships and paving the way for Cold War ships, some of which are already coming this year. It is quite hard to tell which ship exactly is coming to War Thunder since this is just way too stylized and simplified. Many thought it was the IJN Ibuki or the H-39, but most people agreed on the Takao class, which is why we will cover the Takao class today. Sadly for me, there were 4 variants pushed to the devs, so this video will actually talk about all 4 of these variants. Now, this is also my 4th part going into vehicles that were teased on this decal, and I already covered the Su-15, F-16XL and the Homer. My sources come from the German and English Wikipedia as well as the 4 forum posts passed to the devs. And to clear up some potential confusion, the Takao class had 4 ships, like I already said, and their names were actually the Takao, Atago, Maya and Chokai. During the cruiser arms race in 1925, a plan was set into motion, creating 4 new ships on a new cruiser type featuring 20.3 centimeter cannons as the main artillery, 10,000 tons of displacement and a reach of 8,000 sea miles at 14 knots. The plan of these Fujimoto Kiko used the plans of the Myoko class and refined armament details with newly acquired skills. This led to the cannons being able to elevate to up to 70 degrees. Torpedoes were placed on the upper parts of the hull and could now be used overboard. The bridge was now proportionally large since it featured newly added command centers used for fleet operations, communication centers, and a ship security combat information center with a bunch more departments. The first cruisers were then built in 1927. Modernized versions like the Chokai then seeing heavy service throughout the Pacific War. There are a bunch of campaigns showing extensive service with these ships, like the Indian Ocean Campaign, Guadalcanal Campaign, Solomon Islands Campaign, and the Battle of Leyte Gulf. But they first started seeing more active service in the Indian Ocean Campaign. They were used to hunt and sink smaller warships and vessels, and ships like the British minesweeper HMS Scott Harley, Dutch freighter Coradia were sunk by the Takao class, and the Takao class helped capture another Dutch freighter named Bintue Han. With the help of another Takao class ship, the Atago, it sank the USS Pillsbury. Then the Maya, another Takao class, helped in sinking and destroying the destroyer and mine layer HMS Stronghold. The following day, the Maya was present during the sinking of USS Asheville, which was a gunboat, but it did not actively engage themselves. The following day, the Takao, Atago, and Maya attacked a convoy heading into Australia. During this attack of a convoy, they sank a sloop, HMAS Yara. They also sank a minesweeper, a depot. The Atago could then capture 2 freighters. Finally, the Chokai saw action where she sank the US freighter Bienville on April 1st, and a few days later sank the British steamship Ganges. Lastly, all 4 Takao class ships were involved in the Battle of Midway, even though none saw combat. The Atago and Chokai were in Kondo's Midway Invasion Force as Cruiser Division 4 Section 1.
In the next clip, I meant to say Takao, not Atago.
And the Atago and Maya were part of the Aleutian Island campaign as escorts for the 2nd Carrier Striking Force as Cruiser Division 4 Section 2. Following the Battle of Midway, the ships were sent to assist to Guadalcanal campaign. The Chokai served as Admiral Mikawa's flagship during the action that would become known as the Battle of Savo Island, which was most of the devastating Japanese Navy victories of the war, sinking 4 heavy cruisers and damaging several other ships. During this battle, the Chokai directly sank the heavy cruiser USS Vincennes with 2 torpedo hits, and via gunfire assisted in sinking the heavy cruisers HMAS Canberra and USS Astoria, while her consorts sank the heavy cruiser USS Quincy. During this battle, the Chokai was moderately damaged by 3 8-inch shell hits from Astoria and Quincy, one of which knocked out her 8 turret and another exploded in her chart room, injuring Admiral Mikawa. While the Chokai was being repaired, the rest of the fleet escorted carriers during the Battle of the Eastern Solomons and Santa Cruz. On November 15th, the Takao and Atago would see major action during the 2nd Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. Together they crippled the battleship USS South Dakota, landing between 16 and 19 hits. Before the battleship USS USS Washington sank the battleship Kirishima and disrupted the rest of the force, during which the Atago was lightly damaged by a single 5-inch shell from Washington's secondary battery.
So I actually skipped 2 battles and messed up the chronological order, which is why I will improve this here. So in 1943, the 4 Takao spent some time in Japan before being assigned to fight during the Solomon Islands campaign. They deployed in Druk and New Britain before the Maya got some big action fighting a cruiser task force at the Battle of Komandorski Islands. During this battle, the Maya engaged in a duel with the heavy cruiser USS Salt Lake City and was slightly damaged, but in turn hit the cruiser with 7 203mm shells. Then on November 5th, 1943, while presumably all 4 Takaos were anchored in the Rabaul harbor, they were attacked by American aircraft, during which the Takao, Atago and Maya were damaged. These 3 were then sent to Japan for repairs, and that is where the Maya actually got to become an anti-aircraft cruiser. So now the Battle of the Philippine Sea. This battle was fought between the 19th and 20th of June 1944. There is not really anything I can talk about here, but the Takao class did participate. I couldn't find any information on what they did in this battle.
In 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which was also the largest naval battle of World War II, all 4 ships took part. These ships left Brunei on 22nd October 1944 for their last battle, and on the 23rd of October 1944, while passing through the Palawan Passage, the force was attacked by 2 submarines, USS Dada and USS Days. Dada attacked both the Takao and Atago with 2 and 4 torpedoes respectively, which heavily damaged both ships and the Atago actually sinking. The Takao was quite lucky and was then escorted back to Singapore for repairs, where it was being repaired until the end of the war, so it didn't see any more action after that. Now, lastly, the USS Days sank the Maya with a salvo of 4 torpedoes. These major defeats led to the last Takao class ship active and seeing combat in World War II being the Chokai, which continued with the main force. It pulled through the Battle of Sibuyan Sea unscathed before engaging in the later action of Samar. Chokai would engage American escort carriers, destroyers and destroyer escorts of Taffy 3. During the battle, she was engaged by USS Samuel B. Roberts, being a destroyer escort, and was badly damaged by a torpedo hit to her stern. However, the insane Japanese spirit and the will to avenge her sisters led to her not being knocked out of combat and rather continuing the engagement. It then fired on the escort carrier USS White Plains and scored hits, but in turn the flat top hit the Jokai with some 5-inch shells, and even though it was heavily damaged prior, fatal damage really only occurred when air attacks from the USS Kitkin Bay dropped a bomb into its stack. That then destroyed her engine room, and I must say the pilot was on some Luke Skywalker type shit hitting that. After the crew of the Chokai was then rescued by the IJN Fujinami, the Fujinami herself was then sunk by another American aircraft carrier, and that's where the survivors of the Chokai also finally died. There was some debate on how the Chokai sank, and American accounts reported that a shell of the aircraft carrier USS White Plains hit one of their torpedo tubes, which then exploded and sank the Chokai. But obviously the Japanese records did not support this and rather claimed what I just stated, with the bomb flying through the stack and destroying her engine room. This question was then answered in 2019 when the wreck of the Chokai was finally found and it was examined, and then they found out that yes, indeed, a bomb flew into the stack and destroyed its engine room, sinking the Chokai, since the torpedo tubes were still completely intact. Like I said, the unrepaired Takao would sit in Singapore until the end of the war. Both the heavy cruisers Miyoko and Takao were then taken over by the British forces after World War II, and the Takao was then sunk as target practice by the light cruiser HMS Newfoundland in the Malacca Strait, which is quite a way to waste a glorious ship in my opinion. I will now go into general detail with the Takao class. The forum post suggests the Takao itself would have a standard displacement of around 11,350 tons, possibly being increased to 14,260 tons when fully loaded. These limits increased with the 1938/1939 refit, offering a 12,570 tons standard displacement, and under full load 15,490 tons. The 1944 Atago would have a displacement of of around 11,370 tons. Under full load, it would have a displacement of 15,875 tons, which also translates to the 1944 Maya, also being the only anti-aircraft cruiser of these four, but we will go into that later. The 1941 Chokai would have a displacement of around 11,350 tons and a full load displacement of 15,205 tons, so barely any difference. But thanks to them featuring the same engine, featuring 4 main boilers being the TZA Kampon and 12 boilers for the main engine being the Kampon Rogo, their speeds were largely the same, all suggesting a speed of 35.5 knots, being 65.7 kilometers an hour, except the Takao itself, which from the 1938/1939 refit would only have a speed of 34.2 knots, which would be 63.3 kilometers an hour. This engine should deliver 130,000 shaft horsepower, but the Takao post suggests 132,000 shaft horsepower even, so slightly different. Going deeper into the Takao, as built it would feature around 773 men, but later versions, or rather the ship during World War II, would have at least 920 men on board, while other ships like the 1944 Atago should feature 990 men, the Chokai would feature just 824 men, and the Maya 1,105 men. As for dimensions, the Takao class should have a beam roughly 19 meters wide, but the Takao itself suggests that versions following 1939 could have a 20.4 meters wide beam. The draft of the Takao is around 6.11 meters deep, but later versions could have a draft of 6.32 meters, and the 1944 Atago, 1941 Chokai, and 1944 Maya all suggest a 6.57 meter steep draft. In late 1942, the Takao class received a Type 21 radar. In early 1944, it received 2 Type 22 radars, and in addition to that, in late 1944, it received another Type 13 radar. Now, before going into armament that starts to really differentiate these 4 ships from one another, let's talk about protection. While the armor is probably going to be universally the same, they were documented differently. For example, the Takao suggested 102mm of armor at the machinery belt, 127mm of armor at the magazine belt. It has armor varying between 175mm at the bulkheads and a general deck thickness of 35mm, unless you're above the machinery, where it would have between 90 and 70mm of armor. The turrets would have 25mm of armor and the barbettes 75mm. The conning tower, also known as the command tower or bridge, would have 60mm of armor. Like I said, it's universally almost exactly the same, but the 1944 Atago, 1941 Chokai, and 1944 Maya had another way of documenting these values, with slight differences being the following. At the sides and at the belt, it would feature between 102 and 127mm of armor. The deck would have between 32 and 35mm of armor, this time not mentioning any increased armor values above the machinery. The bow and stern would have armor values of between 76 and 102mm. The barbettes would feature armor values of between 76 and 127mm, being completely different to the foreign post of the Takao. The forehead, side, rear, and roof would have 25.4mm of armor, and finally the tiller compartment would have between 25 and 51mm of armor. The Takao class armament was largely the same overall, but early versions, at least of the Takao, featured 5 turrets housing 2 guns, being the 203mm third year type number 2 guns, and alongside 4 120mm 10th year type guns, and a weak anti-armament of just 2 40mm type 91 AA guns and 2 7.7mm machine guns. Its torpedo armament also started off rather weak, housing 4 610mm twin launchers and carrying 16 torpedoes overall. Oh, and no radar yet. This of course heavily changed during the course of the war, at one point bringing the Maya to being a dedicated anti-aircraft cruiser, but let's go into every single possible Takao variant first. During a 1938/1939 refit of the Takao, they revamped the anti-air armament, now housing 4 25mm type 96 turrets, each housing creating 2 of these guns, and the 2 13.2mm Type 93 machine guns, also housing 2 guns each. They also changed the torpedo armament, now being 4 launchers, each housing 4 torpedoes, while keeping the same caliber of 610mm, effectively doubling the torpedoes ready to be launched. Sadly, the torpedoes carried on board have not doubled, but rather slightly increased to now being 24 instead of 16. During a 1941 refit, the ship's anti-air armament changed again. It only hosts the 25mm Type 96 AA guns now, no machine guns anymore. Of course, they increased the amount to compensate, now being 6 turrets, each housing 2 25mm Type 96 guns. During an early 1942 refit, they doubled the amount of secondary guns carried and increased their caliber as well. They had 4 turrets, each housing...
I said 120mm, but I meant to say 127mm.
2 of the 120mm Type 89 guns now. During a late 1942 refit, where the first radar, being the Type 21 radar, finally came into action, they added even more anti-air weaponry, now housing both the 6 twin turrets of the Type 96, but now also 2 turrets housing 3 of the Type 96 guns, so basically added 6 more anti-air guns. And in early 1944, on top of the Type 21 radar, they added 2 Type 22 radars. This of course led to even more anti-air weaponry being added. Now they added 8 25mm Type 96 AA guns separately, not packed into turret housing anymore. And finally, in late 1944, they said fuck it, we ball, and they wanted to absolutely decimate the American Air Force by now adding a whole whopping 36 25mm Type 96 guns used for anti-air. Of course, their anti-air setup now featured 6 turrets housing 3 of each, 6 turrets housing 2 of each, and then 30 separate ones not housed in a turret. They also added a Type 13 radar. And finally, the Takao also carried 3 float planes, being 2 of the E4N2 and 1 E7K1 before World War II, but they changed these to 2 F1M2 and 1 Aichi E13A1 during World War II. This could also go for the other ships, but they did not specify that. So in total, depending on the refit version, its BR can vary a lot. Personally, I think they will add a late 1944 refit version, since that is what the people voted for, but I will go into that later. Let's first go into the other ship's armament. Luckily, this time they will only offer a single variant and not a ton of variants. Continuing with the 1944 Atago, it carried 5 twin turrets of the 203mm third year Type No. 2 guns as main armament, 4 twin turrets of the 127mm Type 89 guns as secondary armament, and now for anti-air armament, 2 turrets housing 3 of the 25mm Type 96 guns, each 6 twin turrets of the Type 96 guns, and 8 separate Type 96 guns not housed in any turret. It also had 4 610mm quadruple torpedo launchers, the only difference being the anti-air armament compared to the Takao. Continuing with the 1941 Chokai, it carried the same 5 twin turrets of the 203mm third year Type No. 2 guns, once again as main armament, this time with weaker and less secondary armament, being 4 of the 120mm 10th year Type guns housed separately, so no turrets housing multiple, 4 twin turrets of the Type 96 AA guns, and 2 twin turrets of the 30mm Type 93 machine guns. It also had 3 twin launches of the 610mm torpedo tubes. Finally, the Maya. This thing, as already stated before, specialized in anti-air. That is why it only carried 4 twin turrets of the 203mm third year Type No. 2 guns instead of 5, this time housing more secondary armament, since it can also be used to counter planes, now housing 6 twin turrets of the 127mm Type 89 guns, and for anti-air of course 13 turrets, each housing 3 of the 25mm Type 96 guns, while it also had 27 separately placed Type 96 guns and 4 quadruple launchers of the 610mm torpedo. So before going into the battle rating, I would personally assume that the 1944 Takao is by far the strongest. It is also the only Takao class surviving the war, and in comparison to my other video, my next section will not go into possible ammo variation, since there is not really anything to talk about. The forum posts haven't provided any possible shell coming into the game, and upon visiting Wikipedia pages, they only showed ranges and impact velocity, not any penetration, TNT values, or something of that that kind. But as far as I know, as any other ship in War Thunder, the anti-air weaponry should offer incendiary shrapnel shells while exploding before impact. I could probably find more information on all of these questions, including secondary armament and so on, but even though I don't want to admit it, I am too lazy. Also, since I barely played naval, I don't really know if they actually have incendiary shrapnel shells on warships, but in my 1 or 2 naval matches, I do think I experienced some proximity exploding shells, but I mean, if you play naval, you probably know. Anyway, since we are rapidly approaching the end of this video, let's finally talk about its possible battle rating. Like I already said a moment before, I have not played War Thunder Naval, so I don't really want to talk about how you could play the ship or how it might perform, since I have no idea. But anyway, first of all, the Takao would be the best all-rounder, I guess, offering strong anti-air weaponry and excellent ship-to-ship armament. The Takao comes close, but its anti-air is quite lacking in comparison. The Chokai is also really good, but you might want to use it just further back overall, behind some other ships in a fleet formation maybe, since it basically has no real anti-air armament. And the Maya can still deal heavy damage to enemy cruisers, yes, but its anti-air configuration is not made to counter and engage ships, but rather for supporting a fleet with anti-air fire. Second of all, these ships are going to be placed in the Blue Water Fleet, obviously. The Takao class ships, being classified as heavy cruisers, would appear on the left side of the tech tree. Battleships are the last ships appearing in the Japanese tech tree, starting from rank 6, meaning that they will probably appear before rank 6. So after my very thoughtful calculation of around 3 seconds, I assume that at least one of the ships, probably the 1944 Atago, would follow the IJN tone on the left side of the tech tree. It could possibly be placed before it with a BR between 6.0 and 6.7. The Maya could join as either a premium or event vehicle later this year with a BR roughly equal to that of the Atago, while the 1941 Chokai could potentially have a BR of 5.3 or 5.7, being placed either after or before the folder containing the IJ and Furutaka and Aoba. Finally, the Takao, I could imagine it joining in a folder with the Atago, or potentially it could be placed after it with a BR difference of 0.3.
Don't forget, we are assuming that it will get a late 1944 variant, which is reasonable because the people voted for it, but Gaijin could technically place it anywhere. They have multiple variations to go from, and if they decide to not add a late 1944 variant, it could possibly be placed anywhere in the tech tree. So take everything with a grain of salt, and yeah.
Now that I went into all of this, I'm surprised that you even got to see this part of the video, since barely anyone plays naval, I think. Though we should give it a try. Ever since the Bismarck and Yamato joined, I have been thinking of grinding naval tech trees, but I was not really caught by the idea yet, and I didn't really try it, probably because all of my friends do not play naval yet, and the naval queue times, as far as I remember, are horrendous. But the day will come when I grind naval. Anyhow, if you enjoyed, please leave a like, and either way, leave some criticism. Join my Discord, check out my other socials, and subscribe if you don't want to miss out, since I will create 2 more parts talking about the last 2 vehicles teased on the 2026 teaser decal Zoom. The vehicles being this one and this one, but after a very painful recording of around, I think, short of 60 minutes, that is finally it for today. Goodbye.